My name is Helen Price, and the night my daughter-in-law locked me out of my own house, I was still dragging my suitcase up the front steps, thinking about nothing more dramatic than a hot shower and clean sheets. I had been gone for 3 weeks on a bus tour with other retired nurses. 3 weeks of shared hotel rooms and stiff mattresses and politely pretending I wasn't homesick. That little blue house at the end of the quiet cul-de-sac in Portland, Oregon, has been my anchor for almost 20 years. I paid for every shingle on the roof with overtime shifts and sore knees, and as I stood on the porch with my key in my hand, I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. The warmth vanished when the key stopped cold in the lock. The deadbolt was thrown from the inside. For a second, I thought I'd misremembered how my own door worked. I jiggled the handle, tried again, then rang the bell. My suitcase bumped against my calf. November air seeped through my coat and up my sleeves. I rang the bell again, harder this time. There was laughter on the other side, a TV blaring, glasses clinking. I could hear voices, dozens of them. It sounded like, none of them mine. The porch light snapped on. The door opened just a crack, no more than 3 inches, held tight by the chain. My daughter-in-law, Haley, filled the gap with her perfect makeup and that tight little smile she wore when she wanted something. "Oh, good. You're back," she said, as if I'd just come in from the driveway, not from the airport. "We need you to run to the gourmet market. 10 pounds of prime rib, the good marbled kind, beluga caviar. Not the cheap stuff. 3 bottles of the Reserve Cabernet, the one from the top shelf. Then you can come in." I looked at her, at the chain across my own front door, and felt something inside me tilt. "Excuse me?" I asked. Haley's smile didn't waver. "Mom, my whole family is here. We're 12 for dinner. If you don't bring the food, there's nothing to serve. So please hurry, and don't forget the caviar." I didn't answer her right away. For a moment, I just stared at the sliver of my own living room behind her shoulder. My sofa. My lamp. My framed picture of Ryan at 5 years old in his dinosaur pajamas, half hidden now behind some stranger's winter coat hanging on the hall tree. There were shoes everywhere, men's boots I didn't recognize, a little girl's sparkly sneakers I had never seen. Voices floated in from the kitchen, loud and happy, as if this were their house, not mine. "Where's Ryan?" I managed. Haley rolled her eyes the way my son used to when he was 15 and thought he knew everything. "In the kitchen. We've been cooking all day." "Well, that oven of yours is so small." She sighed like my appliances had personally offended her. "Anyway, can you please go? The butcher closes at 8. I pressed my hand against the door, pushing just enough that the chain went taut. "You've been here. How long?" She shrugged, a little flick of her shoulder. "We came over a couple days after you left. It's easier than the apartment. There's more space for everyone. Mom and Dad flew in yesterday. Uncle Joe and Aunt Linda got here this morning. They're all starving. Helen." Hearing my own name in that tone did something to me, like I was a neighbor she barely tolerated. "And you didn't think to ask me?" I said. "We knew you'd say yes," she answered lightly. "You're always so generous. Now really, you're making this awkward. Just grab your purse, go to Harbor and Green, you know the one downtown, and get what we need. You can put everything on that card you gave Ryan for emergencies. We'll pay you back." She said the last part quickly, like tossing a napkin on a mess. Behind her, over her shoulder. I finally caught sight of my son. Ryan was standing at the edge of the kitchen, a dish towel in his hands, watching us. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, I thought he would come over, unhook the chain, pull me inside and say, "What are we doing? This is Mom's house." He lifted one hand in a little wave instead, an embarrassed half smile on his face. Then he turned away and disappeared back into the noise. Something in my chest cracked, quietly, like thin glass under pressure. Haley's smile flattened. Look, if you're not going to do this, I don't know what we're going to feed people. Do you want them to think you're rude? Standing out here is already weird. I heard my mother's voice in the back of my mind, the woman who raised 4 kids with 2 jobs and no patience for public scenes. Don't make a fuss. Helen, be gracious. You're the mother. You bend so the children don't break? I swallowed. Fine, I said, and the word tasted like defeat. Make me a list. Her face lit up as if I'd given her a birthday present. She rattled off cuts of meat, cheeses with names I couldn't pronounce, imported olives, artisan bread, and a dessert. That looks expensive. I typed it all into the Notes app on my phone because my hands were shaking too much to trust my memory. And after I get all this, I said, I can come in. Of course, she chirped, as if that had never been in question. She shut the door, and I heard the deadbolt slide back into place. On the drive to Harbor and Green, I cried so hard I had to blink to keep the streetlights from smearing into bright, useless halos. I kept seeing Ryan's face at the edge of my vision, that sheepish smile. The way he had lifted his hand at me like I was a neighbor dropping by uninvited, instead of the woman who had worked double shifts for years so he could go to college. The high-end market sat in a neighborhood of glossy glass storefronts and restaurants that required reservations. I parked between 2 oversized SUVs, both of them newer than my 12-year-old sedan, and sat there with my fingers still gripping the steering wheel. I could have driven away then. I could have gone back to the hotel near the airport or to my friend Martha's apartment across town, but 40 years of habit is a stubborn thing. I had always fixed things with money and work. This felt, in some twisted way, like just one more shift. Inside. The store was bright and quiet, soft music humming under the sound of carts and murmured conversations. The meat counter gleamed. The prime rib was arranged like jewelry, thick white marbling running through dark red, each piece resting on a black tray with a tiny sign jabbed into it. I found the cut Haley wanted and read the price twice, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. $42 a pound, 10 pounds on my list, $400 for meat my son and his in-laws would eat while I washed their dishes. I asked the butcher for 10 pounds, heard my own voice as if it belonged to someone else, and watched him wrap the meat in paper and hand it across the counter. It was heavier than it looked. I moved through the aisles with my cart, picking up things from the list like I was on autopilot. A little glass jar of black caviar nestled in crushed ice, $250 for something that would vanish on crackers in less than 10 minutes. A wheel of soft cheese in a wooden box. A loaf of sourdough that cost more than the big bags of flour I used to buy when Ryan was growing up, and we made bread together in a battered pan. Near the back of the store, I passed an older woman standing very still in front of the rice. Her gray hair was pulled back into a loose bun, her cart empty except for a gallon of milk and a bag of carrots. She held one bag of rice, read the label, put it back, picked up another. Her fingers traced the price. I recognized the look on her face. I had worn that look most of my adult life, doing the math between what I wanted to feed my child and what my paycheck allowed. My cart was full of luxuries for people who had locked me out of the home I'd bled for. By the time I reached the checkout, the items blurred together. The cashier, a young man with tired eyes and a nose ring, scanned each thing and set it on the belt. The total climbed on the little screen, past 200, past 600, past 1,000. He lifted the jar of caviar and gave a low whistle. "Someone's having a fancy night," he said, trying to be friendly. "Apparently," I answered. The final number popped up, 1,200 and something. I stared at it. All I could see superimposed over the glowing digits were other numbers, older ones, written in my own careful handwriting. Tuition payments. Rent I had quietly covered when Ryan forgot. The down payment on the car, he just had to have to take that new job 30 miles away. The credit card bill after Haley's dream honeymoon. My hand went to my wallet, then it stopped. I thought of the chain across my front door. I thought of Ryan waving at me from inside my house, then turning away. I thought of Haley's tone when she said, "You're always so generous." For the first time in my life, the generosity felt less like a virtue and more like a leash I had knotted around my own neck. "I'm sorry," I said. The cashier blinked. "Ma'am?" I changed my mind. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "I don't need any of this." I slid my wallet back into my purse and stepped away from the cart. Behind me, someone in line shifted impatiently, then went silent when they saw my face. The cashier looked from me to the full cart, then nodded slowly. "Do you want me to?" "Yes," I said. "Please put it all back. I'm sorry for the trouble." "It's okay," he said softly. "It happens." But it didn't. Not to me. I had never changed my mind once the decision was made, not where my son was concerned. I had always paid, always given, always said yes. I walked out into the cold night air with my purse on my shoulder and my hands empty. The automatic doors hissed shut behind me like a curtain falling at the end of a very long act. In the parking lot, under the orange glow of the street lamps, I climbed into my car and didn't start it. I just sat there, listening to my heartbeat thud in my ears, realizing I had done something small and enormous at the same time. For the first time in a very long while, I had told my son no. I sat in my car outside the market for a long time, staring at the empty passenger seat as if some part of myself might suddenly materialize there and tell me what to do. The parking lot was quiet, washed in the sickly yellow of the overhead lamps. A grocery cart rolled across the asphalt in the breeze, bumping into a concrete divider, and the hollow clatter echoed louder than it should have. My hands were still trembling from walking away from the checkout lane. I'd never done something like that in my life. Not once. Not when Ryan was small, not when money was tight, not even during the years when I worked until my bones ached. I had always finished what was expected of me, even when it cost me more than anyone knew. Tonight, for the first time, I'd stopped myself. The thought both steadied and frightened me. I took a breath, then another. Going home was out of the question. I couldn't walk back to that door with my head bowed, pretending that Haley's behavior was something reasonable people tolerated. I couldn't pretend not to hear Ryan's silence ringing louder than any of his mother-in-law's demands. I started the engine and let the car drift through the dim streets. The radio was off, and I didn't bother turning it on. My mind supplied its own soundtrack, memories rising and sinking like waves. I passed neighborhood after neighborhood until the familiar outline of Maplewood Park appeared on my right. Ryan had learned to ride his bike there. He had split his lip on the jungle gym there. We had sat on the same green bench every Sunday, sharing a single cup of hot chocolate because that was all I could afford back then. I turned into the small lot and stepped out. The cold air slapped my cheeks, almost grateful for the sting. It reminded me I was still here, still capable of feeling something other than exhaustion. The path was empty except for a jogger in the distance. I walked slowly, gravel crunching beneath my shoes, until I reached the pond. The water was still, reflecting the streetlights like broken glass. I sat down on the old bench, my breath fogged in front of me. For a moment, I let myself imagine Ryan at 5 years old again, running in circles, calling for me to watch him, to be proud of him. I heard his little voice so clearly that it twisted something deep in my chest. How had we traveled so far from that boy to the man who stood behind a kitchen counter while his wife locked me out? My phone buzzed. I didn't bother checking the screen. I already knew it was them. My silence probably embarrassed Haley in front of her guests. Ryan was likely wringing his hands, torn between me and the woman he'd chosen to build a life with. But no matter how many times the phone vibrated, none of those messages could erase the image of him turning away when I needed him most. I finally checked the screen when the buzzing stopped. Missed calls. Too many messages. Not one of them asked if I was safe or cold or stranded somewhere. Not one expressed concern, only irritation, expectation, pressure. The realization landed like a stone. I didn't owe them my suffering. I got back in the car and drove until the glow of Willow and Pines Cafe appeared on a corner. I had passed it hundreds of times, always telling myself I didn't need expensive coffee, always saving instead for someone else's emergency. Tonight, for once. I walked inside. Warm air hit my face, the smell of cinnamon wrapped around me like a blanket. I ordered a black coffee and chose a small corner table. When I sat down, my shoulders finally sagged, as if my body had been waiting for permission to relax. I reached into my purse and pulled out the brown notebook I'd carried for years. My hands hesitated before opening it, knowing what waited inside. When I finally flipped the cover, my own handwriting stared back at me. Every page was a quiet confession. The loans I gave, the bills I paid, the promises that never materialized. I had documented everything because some part of me knew no one else ever would. Wedding loan, apartment deposit, car repairs, medical copays, anniversary trip, $50,000 in ink. My throat tightened. I pressed my palms against my eyes, willing the tears to stay put. I wasn't ashamed of what I'd given. I was ashamed of what I'd allowed, of how easily I'd erased myself in the name of being a good mother. My phone buzzed again. I turned it over. 17 new messages. I put it face down. Then I called Martha. She arrived like the world had not disappointed her one bit, slipping into the seat across from me with her coat still damp from the mist outside. When I told her everything, her expression didn't twist into shock or judgment. She just listened the way only someone who has known you through every hard season can. When I finished, she reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "Helen," she said quietly, "this isn't the first time they crossed a line. It's the first time you saw it." Her words cracked something open, not in a painful way, but like a window being lifted in a stale room. "I don't know where to go," I whispered. "You don't go back there tonight," she said. "That's the only rule?" She followed behind me as I drove to a small hotel on the edge of the city. The lobby was quiet. The clerk, polite. When I entered the room, I stood there listening to the hum of the heater. No shouting, no expectations. Just silence. Martha placed a worn photo album on the bed. "You forgot who you were," she said softly. "Maybe this will help you remember." I opened it. There I was, young, tired, hopeful, holding a toddler with bright eyes and frosting on his cheeks. The sight of that tiny boy made something inside me ache. That woman in the photograph deserved respect, and I was still her. Tonight, for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if I stopped being the person everyone expected. Tonight, I chose myself. I woke early in the hotel, disoriented by the hum of the heater and the stillness around me. For years, mornings had begun with someone needing something from me, Ryan asking for help, Haley venting about some inconvenience, responsibilities piling up before I'd even fully opened my eyes. That morning, the quiet felt like a gentle reminder that my life hadn't ended just because I finally refused to be used. I showered slowly, letting the steam clear the heaviness lodged in my chest, then drove downtown to meet Attorney Minford. His office overlooked the river, sunlight glinting off the surface in thin, trembling lines. When he led me inside, I felt the strange steadiness that comes when a decision has already been made inside you. Long before the paperwork exists to prove it, I told him everything, beginning with the deadbolt. He listened quietly, taking notes only when necessary, never interrupting or rushing me. When I finished, he leaned back and explained that the house was legally mine. I had every right to reclaim it. Hearing those words felt like someone had opened a window in a suffocating room. I signed the notice he prepared, steady, knowing it wasn't revenge guiding me, but the need to protect what remained of myself. I drove straight home afterward, feeling the weight of the notice in my purse like a quiet, necessary truth. When I stepped inside, the air felt wrong, thick with the leftovers of someone else's life. A jacket I didn't recognize hung over my banister. Each detail reminded me how easily people neglect what they never had to earn, how quickly familiarity breeds carelessness in those who carry no responsibility. My bedroom struck hardest. The comforter was rumpled, and Haley's cosmetics sprawled across my vanity in careless clusters. Her dresses hung beside mine, their fabric brushing my sleeves as if claiming space they had no right to. I stood in the doorway, letting the ache rise slowly. This wasn't thoughtlessness. It was intrusion, a rewriting of the home I built, reducing my presence to a footnote. I packed quietly, folding clothes with the practiced motions of someone preparing for a storm rather than a trip. My hands steadied as I worked, each item placed into the suitcase, reminding me that I still had agency, that I wasn't trapped. I had just zipped the second bag when I heard the front door creak. Ryan's footsteps approached slowly, hesitant in a way that made my heart twist, despite everything. He stood in the doorway, eyes tired, shoulders drawn as if bracing for impact. "Mom," he said, voice low. "Can we talk?" I nodded, though I didn't move closer. He apologized for Haley, stumbling over explanations that felt thin even as he spoke them. Stress, confusion, words that floated above the real issue. He kept searching my face for softness, but I felt the lines inside me settling into place. I told him calmly about the notice, about needing space to reclaim the parts of myself I had buried under years of giving. His face crumpled, not in anger, but in grief. He asked if this meant I didn't love him. I told him love wasn't supposed to cost a person their dignity. The words hung between us, heavy and honest, and for the first time I saw him listening. I carried my suitcases past him, feeling the weight of every decision that had brought us here, yet lighter than I had in years. Outside, the sky hovered in a soft gray, holding itself steady as if it knew I needed the world to stay calm for a moment. I loaded the trunk and stood there, breathing, realizing I wasn't abandoning my home. I was walking toward the life I'd misplaced. When I finally drove away, the house shrank in the rearview mirror, but my heart didn't shrink with it. Instead, something opened, a quiet, widening sense of possibility. I didn't know what the next month would bring or how long it would take for Ryan and me to find steadier ground, but for the first time in years, I felt the road stretching ahead like an invitation, and I chose to follow it.